Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Mike Wilkinson. Mike has over 25 years of worldwide training and consultancy experience and is the author of multiple books, including Value-Based Pricing and The 7 Challenges of Value. At Axia Value Solutions, he helps sales teams find new ways of understanding and communicating value so that they are rewarded for the value they deliver. So with that, Mike, welcome.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here. I do actually have one thing to admit, and that is that the 25 years is now just a little bit on the conservative side, to be honest, but there you go. Anyway, as always, my focus is going to be on value and on understanding, creating, and delivering outstanding customer value and getting paid for it. And what I'd like to do today is pick on just 2 or 3 of the issues that I seem to be coming across frequently when I'm working with my clients, just to see how true they are for you and to look at some possible solutions using leverage point during the sales process, but more about that later. I work exclusively in the B2B space, and I am amazed at how many issues are common across all sorts of businesses in all sorts of business sectors. However, look, before we start, I do have an admission to make, and that is that I don't have all the answers. In fact, my little book could be quite a big little book, to be honest, but as you can probably tell, I have been around a while, I have learned a lot, but that does not mean, sadly, that I have all the answers, because there always seems to be something new to learn. And I guess really that's partially what this webinar is all about. Now, the value journey which I take my clients on is not necessarily an easy one. And I'm not going to pretend that I have a magic wand or a silver bullet. If you choose to go on your value journey, it will take an effort on your part, but believe me, it really is worth it. But let's just take a step back and start with some of the common challenges that I am really hearing constantly at the moment. The first is, you won't be surprised to hear that we tend to discount too much in order to win or retain business and find it difficult to defend prices. The second one is our salespeople or we, our salespeople or we tend to talk product first rather than customer first, and we lose business to our competitors even when we know we have the best solution. Now, I'm guessing that if you are in sales, you are going to be all too familiar with those, and I'm equally sure you can probably think of a host of other challenges that you face. But today I'm going to use the last one as the focus, and that is we lose business even when we know we have the best solution. Now, over the years, I have conducted lots of surveys, and it may well be that you've taken part in one of them yourself. And on average, between 70 and 84% of the people that respond agree with that statement. They do lose business even when they know they have the best solution. So clearly, this is a significant problem. And the question that instantly leaps to my mind is why? Why? If you truly think that your solution is the best out there, why are you losing business? And who says your solution is best? Do you think your competitors are going around saying that their solution is second best? I suspect that they may well think that their solution is the best too, and probably go around saying so. So from a customer's perspective, there's 2 best solutions for you straight away, and there may very well be more. And the challenge for your customer is to decide which of the best is best for them. So who decides? Who decides what's best? And here's a clue. It's not us. We may think we are the best, but to be honest, it really doesn't matter what we think. What really matters ultimately is, what does our customer think? Because if you do believe you're the best and you still lose business, we need to understand what happened. And what does best actually look like anyway? So To look for possible answers, we're going to turn to the 7 challenges of value. And particularly, we're going to look at challenges 1 and 5. Challenge 1, which is understanding value, and challenge 5, which is about communicating value. Because if we're losing business that we think we should have won, I think there are more than these 2, but certainly these 2 are in the frame for responsibility. So either we are failing to understand the things that the customer does value, which is challenge 1, or we are simply failing to communicate our value effectively and persuasively enough to convince the customer that they should come with us, which is challenge 5. Either way, if you do end up losing business, you have just wasted a lot of time, money, and effort, not to mention the huge disappointment when we do lose, especially when we lose business that we think we should have won. So let's start by looking at challenge 1, understanding just what value is. And first of all, what is value as a concept? Because value is a word that we all use, certainly in business, probably on a daily basis. And we assume that everybody understands what we mean when we say that this is great value, this is poor value, we need to improve our value, whatever it might be. The assumption is that everybody understands exactly what it is that we're talking about. But the reality, of course, is that they don't, because they understand value from their point of view and we understand it from ours. So in a kind of roundabout way, yeah, we do. We all understand value and we all understand it from our own point of view. But the real question is, knowing what it means to us is not enough. That's the problem. What we need to do is we need to understand what it means to our customers. Now, some years ago, we actually really started to take a look at what value meant, particularly from a sales perspective. And we came up with a definition together with a group of salespeople at a conference over in Copenhagen. And our definition of value, after much thinking, was value is a mystery. And our job is to solve the value mystery. Because realistically, if we don't understand what it is that our customers consider to be value, then to all intents and purposes, it is a mystery. And it's important to solve it because ultimately value is defined by the customer, not by you. Now, knowing that value is a mystery is all well and good, great, but we need to know how we're going to solve the mystery. And to do that, we actually really need some sort of framework around which we can think about value. And for that, we created something called the value triad. And as you can see, the value triad has 3 components. It has revenue gain, cost reduction, and emotional contribution. So let's look first at revenue or performance gain. And because some businesses or operations aren't actually revenue focused, performance gain actually probably makes more sense in those situations. For example, you'd like to think that hospitals are more interested in inpatient outcomes rather than necessarily earning revenue. So that would be our measure. But the question you need to ask yourself is, how can our product or service help our customer improve their revenues or their performance? The second element is cost reduction. And the question here is very similar. How can our product or service help our customer to reduce their costs? Now, if you look at those 2, they are both tangible and objective measures. We can and we should monetize them. We need to put real value around them because numbers are much more persuasive ultimately than bland statements, vague promises, and vague assertions. However, if you are going to do that, you need to understand 2 things about your customer. 1, when it comes to revenue, where does the customer's revenue come from? And how do they generate that revenue? And equally, when you think about the levers of revenue, which of course are volume and price, how can you impact on one or both of those measures? And secondly, cost. Where and how do they incur costs? Particularly, where and how do they incur those costs that you can actually help them to reduce? Because if we don't know the answer to those two questions, it's going to be much more difficult to demonstrate how we can help them to improve their revenue or reduce their costs if we have absolutely no idea where they came from in the first place. Now, the final component is emotional contribution. And this is to do with trust, confidence, the brand, the relationships, ease of doing business, cultural fit, just feeling good about doing business with you, and all of those fine things. And emotional contribution is fundamentally important. It may not be tangible, it may not be objective, but it is very important. Businesses don't make decisions, people do. And as long as that is the case, this emotional element will remain extremely important. When you add those three things together, revenue gain, cost reduction, and emotional contribution, you get the total value to the customer. And as an exercise, if you haven't done it, I really do recommend that you spend some time considering exactly how you and your business can deliver revenue gain and cost reduction and emotional contribution to your customers. And you can many of my clients like to do it initially on a segment by segment basis. So they've got a segment view of where they think they can add value. And then clearly when you're doing it with an individual customer, you would then look at it from a specific customer requirement. Which actually takes us on to my thoughts around what I call generic issues. Generic issues are those issues that you can anticipate as being common to all businesses in a given business segment. So before you even walk through the door of a customer, you already know, or you can anticipate what the problems, the issues, the challenges, etc., are going to be. And that, in terms of planning in advance of the call, that is just hugely helpful. But clearly, in the call, you must test your assumptions in conversation with the customer, because what we need to do is to translate generic issues into specific issues. And as you can see, specific issues are the issues that are unique to individual customers within the given business segment. You then need to explore the value drivers that are important to the customer and are behind those issues. So it's about understanding through effective questioning and listening and demonstrating that we've got an understanding of those things that are relevant to the customer. Now, that's all great, but you may well be wondering, how do we do all of that? And I think an important starting point is to have an effective sales process. Now, I have a very simple value sales process. It has just 4 steps in it, because I firmly believe that that part of my job is to simplify the complex, not complicate the simple. And as we go through this process, I am absolutely sure, particularly if you are sales guys, you will see how it complements virtually any process that you might be using right now. So the first step of my mega complex 4-step sales program is opportunity assessment. Wherever your potential sales opportunities may come from, you need to evaluate them to determine whether you want to pursue them or not, because not all opportunities and leads are born equal. Now, I know that there are some really sophisticated tools out there to help you to do exactly that, but bottom line, there are only 2 questions that you really want the answers to. Question 1 is, do we want this business? And question 2 is, can we win it? So is it the kind of business that fits into what you're trying to do? Are they the kind of customers that we want to work with? Or are they going to be just a complete pain from start to finish? Are we going to make margins out of them that we would wish to? Are they going to be ongoing opportunities? Is there a conflict of interest? Are they just obsessed with price? Is it going to be the sort of customer that improves or enhances our reputation in the marketplace? So I think we really do need to understand before we pursue business whether it is a quality of business that we would wish to have. And the second question is, can we win it? And we do need to be realistic here. I know very often salespeople are wildly optimistic about these sorts of things, but do you have the contacts? Do you know the people? Can you get to them? Do you actually understand the customer's business? Is it a target customer? Have you got everything in place that you need to win the business? And can you develop a differentiated solution and communicate your value effectively to the customer? Now, clearly, if the answer to both of those questions is yes, then let's go for it and go for it 100%. But if the answer to either of those is no, then probably you should not be pursuing it. If you don't want it, then you wouldn't possibly want to pursue it. Can you win it? As I said, don't kid yourself. If realistically you cannot expect to win this, you should stop now, because the risk is that all you are going to do is to invest your time, money, and effort in an opportunity that, to be honest, is simply going to be a distraction when compared with the other opportunities that you are pursuing. And more than that, it takes resource away from what you're trying to do. Now, for me, that doesn't mean we should ditch it forever. You maybe want to be asking yourself, how can I make sure that the next time this opportunity comes up or an opportunity comes up with this customer, I'm going to be better positioned to win it? But I think those are two really important questions before any opportunity goes into your sales pipeline. And by the way, you should also clearly be reviewing opportunities that are in your sales pipeline and asking those questions as you go through it. Because if at any time it becomes clear that really, now that we know a little bit more about this, we don't want it, or now we know a bit more about it, we know we don't actually have any chance of winning it, then you need to get it out of the pipeline so that resource, particularly of time, can be dedicated towards other better qualified opportunities. So that moves me on to the second stage of the value sales process, and that is value discovery. And this is the bit where we understand the things that our customers value. And for me, this is absolutely the most important part of the entire process. Why that is, I'll explain in a moment, but there are two elements to this, as you can see. One is to identify the right people, and the other is to make sure that we understand the opportunity. So only two small steps on the chart, but a bit like a duck, there's an awful lot going on underneath here. So very simply, we need to talk to the right people. And I am frequently asked, who should we talk to? And increasingly, I think the answer is that the person that we need to talk to is the person or the people who will benefit the most from the value that we can deliver. And that's important for a whole number of reasons. And one is, first of all, these days, I don't know whether you thought about this, but we are really very rarely there when the decision is made. So we need somebody in the client organization who will be selling on our behalf, who will be putting our case forward. Now, the higher up the organization that person is, clearly the better. But identifying who's going to benefit from this is hugely important. So when it comes to understanding people, we need to understand first who is going to be involved in the decision. And secondly, we need to understand how the decision is going to be made. And if we've got somebody or a group of people on our side who really do buy into our solution and the value that we can deliver, then they are much more likely to help us navigate the complexities of the buying process and identify how we're doing, who we need to talk to, who's an influencer, who's a decision maker, and all of those great things. Next, as I said, is to explore the opportunity. And the answer here is simply great questions. Great salespeople ask great questions, period. There is no other way, there's no shortcut. And this is important because the selling takes place in the value discovery stage as the customer sells themselves with their answers to your well-crafted questions. Let me read that again. The selling takes place in the value discovery stage as the customer sells themselves with their answers to your well-crafted questions. And thanks to my friend Peter Thompson for that quote. If the customer knows and feels that they have had a valuable conversation with someone who's focused on them and not just pushing their products, who they know now understands their challenges and their issues, my view is that they are now very much closer to making the purchase decision and coming with you. And what's the one thing we haven't talked about yet? We haven't talked about our products and our services. For me, great value discovery truly is the fast lane to the sale. It might sound slightly counterintuitive, but it's absolutely true. So mastering great questioning, listening, and summarizing skills is crucial. And these are not basic skills. They are absolutely fundamental. Now, people do tell me, look, we've done listening skills, we've done questioning skills before, and then they go on to demonstrate an inability to use them effectively. So again, don't kid yourself. This is one skill that as sellers, you need to constantly practice. Just like the golfer needs to practice driving, putting, and chipping, we need to constantly practice our questioning, listening, and summarizing skills so that we become masters of our art. And if we do that effectively, this means the focus is customer first, not product first. And as you may remember, one of the other challenges that I outlined at the beginning was exactly that. And as Tony Alessandra very nicely puts it, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Now, I hear that quoted so often, but I see it practiced all too rarely. And salespeople do tend to talk product first, don't they? And it's usually because it's just simply what they feel most comfortable with. But we do need to get our salespeople to adopt a questioning path and a sales approach that puts customers first. Now, the approach I use is really very simple and straightforward, and it works. And it works because it puts some structure into the conversation. If you like, it provides a sort of mental agenda for people to work through as they go through the conversation with the customer. Now, what I'm going to show you is very, very much a summary of how the whole thing works, just by way of example. I'm calling it today the questions map, but I call it all sorts of things as each day goes by. But the starting point is to understand the background. So do your research just like you would do if you were going for a job interview, and then check out with the customer whether your assumptions are correct or not. Now, this is going to be just basic background research, so very much neutral background stuff. It's important to know, and it's important to clarify it. It demonstrates to your customer that you've actually done something, you've done some background work. You haven't walked in expecting the customer to tell you everything about the business, because you're just checking out now what your understanding is. You then move on to uncovering the issues and the challenges that the customer is facing right now. And if necessary, this is where the work you did on defining generic issues earlier on is so useful. Because if you have a customer who's not coming up with suggestions as to how the issues he might be facing, you can use your generic issues to say, well, look, when I talk to customers in your kind of business, the sorts of issues I'm finding they're facing right now are this and this or whatever. To what extent do they apply to you? And I find it amazing just how effective that can be at stimulating the conversation and moving things forward. Once you've understood the issues, you need to summarize them back to the customer. This is good practice. The customer will now know that you know, and they can also correct or add anything at this point. The question then is, what is the impact of those issues on their business? And can I suggest that you need to look at this through the lens of the value triad? As much as possible, we need to monetize revenue gain and cost reduction, and not forget emotional contribution. And one of the things that we need to do at this point is we need to make these numbers big. If I can solve the problem, what's it worth to them? So let's assume that they're losing £3,000, $3,000, whatever it might be, doing something each month. But don't look at it as £3,000 a month. It's actually 3,000 times 12, or £36,000 in a year. Now that's bigger. It starts to become more persuasive. How long has this been going on, you ask your customer, and the customer may say, well, maybe a year. Well, now it's not a £36,000 problem, it's a £72,000 or a $72,000 problem. That is bigger still. How long is it likely to continue if we don't do anything about it? whoa, I don't know, another year, maybe more. So that's not a £3,000 a month problem anymore. I've done it again, look. It's £108,000, $108,000. Now that is much more likely to get this issue much higher up the customer's agenda, much more higher up their list of priorities. Because the question is, are they committed to doing something about it? The bigger they feel that the issue is, the more likely it is that they will do something. Recent research I read from Challenger says that 4 out of 10 B2B sales ends up in doing nothing, the do nothing approach to doing it. And maybe it is simply because the customer isn't motivated to do anything because they don't see the problem or the issue or the challenge or the opportunity as being great enough to make them want to take action. So within the questioning process, clearly there is a lot we need to find out. And once we've done that, the last thing we should be doing, again, is summarizing. At the end of the value discovery process, you should summarize to the customer. So if I understand you correctly, these are the problems, the issues, the challenges, the opportunities that you're facing. This is the impact of them on your business. The question is, are you committed to doing something about them? Stage 3 then is to demonstrate your value. And what demonstrating means will vary from one business to another. Some of you, for example, may need to go to develop a solution and go to trial. Maybe you have to put a full proposal together, make a formal presentation. And almost certainly you'll have to negotiate the commercial terms before you come to the final close. And when it comes to negotiation, this is not just about giving money away, about giving a discount. By now, you will have built your value. Now's the time to use it. In other words, trade, don't cave. This is not about caving into buyers, telling you you're too expensive or saying they haven't got the budget. It's about beginning to feel increasingly confident that you've got a solution for the customer that adds real value to them and is worth paying for. That takes us to the final step in the process, which is value delivery. And this is where we really need to measure the value that we are delivering to the customer and make sure that it is in line with our original value promise. So, okay, that's the value sales process. So you've got the opportunity assessment, value discovery, value demonstration, and value delivery. Earlier on, I mentioned the 7 challenges of value and that we would use that as our vehicle for addressing the problem. We've looked at challenges 1 and 5. And if you look at the other challenges that we've got, challenge 2 is recognizing that customers' value perceptions are constantly changing. You do need to be aware of that. You might have cracked it, understand what it is, but you know, when people change and legislation changes, budgets change, priorities change, market, all sorts of changes going on, and so does people's perception of value. So all sorts of things that are going on in the customer's business environment will have an impact on that. Number 3, as we've seen, is to identify the people who are going to be involved in the decision-making process and how it's going to be made. Challenge 4 is to differentiate your solution. And remember that differentiation is not just about being different. Differentiation is being different in ways that your customer values. And if you can't differentiate your solution, you effectively become a commodity. If there really is no difference between what you offer and what your competitors can offer, that's it. You're effectively going to be down to negotiating on price. But my experience is that there are virtually no instances where that is actually truly the case. And don't obsess with just product differentiation. Remember, your customer isn't just buying the product from you, they're buying the complete experience of doing business with you. So think about where you can differentiate there. And certainly as a seller, don't forget you personally as a key part of that differentiation. For example, I was reading the other day, in fact, I think it was on a leverage point presentation, some research from Forrester. And that research said that one of the senior buyers was quoted as saying only 12% of the meetings I have with sellers have any value. 12%. I mean, that's absolutely insane. That means that 88% of the meetings that this buyer has with sellers are valueless. Now, if that is true, if that could apply to any one of us, then we should be hanging our heads in shame. But what an opportunity. You and your people can be key differentiators in all of this. If we go through the value discovery process in the way in which I've described, if we demonstrate to our customers that we truly have their interests at heart, we understand their issues, their challenges, we understand the impact of them on their business, then I guarantee that you will have differentiated yourself hugely. They will value the meetings that they have with you. And don't forget that every time that we or one of our salespeople turn up at a customer, our customer is comparing us with our competitors. So how do we stack up? Don't you want to see them to see you and your team as simply the best, most valuable salespeople that they see? Wow, I'd say just amazing. Step 5, anyway, as we've already looked at, is communicating your value. And one of the reasons why we lose business to competitors, even when we know we have the best solution, is a failure to communicate our value. And again, in surveys that I've run, this turns out to be a big problem. On average, more than 60% of the people who've responded say, yeah, we do not communicate our value as effectively as we could. And this is just crazy. It's crazy. Your customer wants to know the answer to the question, why should we choose you rather than another option? And this is where the value proposition is your opportunity to summarize to the customer why on earth it is that they should choose you when they have other alternatives available to them. And this is really at the heart of the initial problem that I outlined. Why is it that some of our customers are choosing our competitors even when we know that we've got the best solution? And this is something that we have absolutely got to focus on and address, particularly in our value proposition. Now, our value proposition really needs to do 3 things. First of all, it must resonate with the customer. In other words, when they hear our value proposition, they can see how it addresses the challenges, the issues, the opportunities, etc., that we have identified in our value discovery process, so that they can look at it and say, yeah, I can see how that works. I want this solution. This is the solution I need. Secondly, it needs to differentiate. So when they look at and hear our value proposition, they can see that there is no alternative as good as the one that we have outlined. Nothing delivers the value that we can deliver. And finally, it probably will need to substantiate. In other words, we need to be able to demonstrate that we can do the things that we say that we can do, so that they can say, yep, I trust you. I believe you can actually deliver on what you're promising. And when you add those 3 things together, you create a really great foundation for capturing your value in your price, building lead generation success, and building long-term loyalty, built on great value, not low prices. And that takes us to challenge 6, and that is we need to capture our value in our price. There we go. And because there's absolutely no point in doing all of this great work and understanding customers all the way through to communicating our value if we then fail to share in that value with the customer. And the final challenge is value delivery. And this is about delivering and measuring the value that you promised and making sure that it is in line with that and making any changes that we need to do if necessary. So really, to pull the threads together, why do we lose business? And it's not just the 2 of failing to understand value and communicating value, important as though they are. I think it's because, first of all, we fail to address the 7 challenges of value. To successfully sell your value, you do need to address each of them. It's a failure to talk to the right people, which is challenge number 3. It's a failure to understand what value means to our customers. And remember, value is defined by the customer. That is challenge number 1. It's a failure to build commitment to change. and that is about challenges 1, 3, 4, and 5. It's a failure to communicate our value effectively, which is challenge 5. And you could argue it's a failure ultimately to deliver our value effectively, which is challenge 7. But I also think it's a failure to be proactive, to manage the sales process effectively as we go through it. Well, guys, I hope that's put in place some of the things that we need to talk about. Sorry about my inability to control a set of slides, but there you go. But those are, I think, some of the things we need to look at to think about how we can overcome some of those 3 challenges that I talked about at the beginning. But what I'd like to do, the question that sort of comes to my mind is, how can we do all of this more effectively? How can we use the leverage point tool in the sales process to help to understand, create, and deliver great customer value and get paid for it? And I think Brian is around to explain.
And Brian, I'll hand that over to you right now.
Excellent. And thanks, Mike. That was great stuff. So I'll spend a few minutes showing a demo or a sample value story from the Leverage Point platform. And I'm going to pause for a second because I think they're going to transition this over. Okay. So what you're looking at here, and hopefully everyone can see my screen, and I'm sure Nick will let me know if they can't. This is a fictitious example of a company called AirVentus. We use this a lot in our demos. And AirVentus manufactures high-end heating and cooling equipment that is used in data centers and in manufacturing facilities. So it's fairly high-end, expensive equipment, but it has a lot of advantages, which we'll talk about. So the particular example we're using today, we're a salesperson and we've been trying to get a meeting with Intel for a long time. And we're actually aware that they are looking to upgrade their existing equipment. They have an incumbent we call NTG. And so we know the NTG incumbent is looking to secure that business. They want to upgrade their equipment that they've already sold to Intel with their newer stuff, but we're competing for that business as well. So Intel has invited us in, and they're typically used to salespeople coming in and talking about product. What we're going to do for an early meeting that we have with them is focus more on value. So they're relatively familiar with what we do. So we're asking them to change the conversation a little bit, because we think by the end of the conversation, they'll have a clear idea of how we can have a stronger business impact by going with the AirVentus equipment than with the incumbent competitor that they're talking with as well. So you see here a value story, and as you'll notice, I've already started to customize this, and I can certainly do this before a meeting by putting in their logo. I can do this during the meeting as well. It functions similar to a PowerPoint presentation, but it has actually a value calculator embedded inside of the presentation. And also, as important, this is a value story. This is not a traditional product presentation. And by the way, we help craft these with our customers. This is part of what we do. So as I mentioned, BTR is a high-end HVAC solution. And there's really 3 areas we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about energy savings. We're going to talk about downtime savings. And we're going to talk about maintenance and how we can impact that as well. So we might start with some challenges that either we have talked to Intel about already, maybe we've had some phone conversations in preparing for this meeting, or if we didn't have that opportunity, we're bringing forward challenges that, as Mike has referred to, other customers have seen. So we're trying to relate our experience and what we've seen from maybe other companies in the industry and try to relate those to what Intel is facing. So these are some typical challenges that a company looking at investing in new equipment for this area might see, and we might talk through these during our conversation. For time's sake, I'll probably move ahead, but you have a chance to see what those are. Then, as we many times start in terms of our value story, we'll start with some assumptions. So again, as Mike referenced, we've done some homework, and our recommendation as leverage point is always to have some baseline data set up in the tool. This shows that you've put some thought into what the environment at Intel in this case might look like, but you're also letting them know up front, these are estimates. These are your best guess based on your research of what they're facing. And you can see the different assumptions here. These are customizable. Our customers build value stories, so they have all different types of assumptions based on the offering or based on the industry that they're dealing with. Now, as we go through these, Intel might tell us that their facility is actually a little bit bigger than what we guessed. It's 1 million square feet. And they're maybe paying more for energy, which we could change. Or as we start to talk about other aspects of their business, we get into an area that is more revenue focused. So Mike talked about the triad, and 2 of those elements are cost savings, which we'll talk about, but it's also revenue. And what we found when we talk with other companies is that when they have unplanned downtime, they lose revenue. Their manufacturing line has to be brought down completely, and they have to fix whatever problem there is and then bring it back up. And so what we hear from our customers, they average about 20 of those unplanned hours per year, and they estimate, especially in the chip manufacturing industry, that they lose about $40,000 per hour when the manufacturing line is down. The Intel folks like that we've thought about that, and they tell us they actually estimated it a little bit higher at $45,000 per hour. So we might spend some time on the assumptions. The good part of this is you're not going in with a blank slate. One of the frustrations I hear from executives when they have salespeople coming in and the salesperson begins asking, you know, the 10th question and then the 15th question and then the 20th, and they're not providing value back. And it can be a frustrating conversation, which sometimes gets cut off relatively quickly. What this provides is an opportunity to both share what you've learned and also update it based on their feedback. And customers are much more willing to say, you know, you're off by 20%, that's a little low, that's a little high, and it's an easier conversation to have. Now you'll notice, by the way, you see these highlights. That means that when we've changed an assumption, that actually impacts the rest of the presentation. So we can see how those numbers will ripple through. So based on those assumptions, we've kind of made 3 key calculations for the customer. So we've calculated their energy costs based on the facility size and how much they're paying for energy. We've calculated the annual loss. So if that 20 hours of downtime is correct and the $45,000 per hour number is what they're comfortable with, then they're potentially losing $900,000 per year in revenue, lost revenue from that unplanned downtime. And they're also interested in certification. So they know there's this LEED certification that's important, and that really has to be part of our discussion. We can't ignore that. Any new equipment that they would buy would need to meet those certain standards. So I'm going to turn off the highlighting just to make the discussion a bit simpler. So now we get into kind of a summary of the impacts that we're estimating based on the assumptions and some other things that we've done. If you haven't realized already, a lot of the work is done prior to walking in the door, and that includes both the assumptions but also the math. And this is what Leverage Point does with our customers. We help you think through the math. We help you build what we call a model that is driving this presentation, and then you can go and gather the assumptions and make them part of the initial presentation that a salesperson can then change. So we're making some estimates here about the value that we can create for Intel. And you'll see maintenance, you'll see downtime, and you'll see energy. So we're making a claim of being able to generate value just in these three areas versus the competition of over $600,000. Now, as Mike has mentioned again in his presentation, you want to make it big. And if you can build up a big enough number to get their attention, and it's true, obviously, you need to be able to back it up, certainly. But if it's big enough, you'll get their attention and you can keep them engaged in the conversation. They want to see how you can help them generate this value for their company. So what we'll do next is go through actually each of these three pieces and explain our thinking. We're going to explain our logic. And so in maintenance cost savings, we're basically telling them that they don't need to hire third-party companies anymore. We're into this Internet of Things, and we're going to manage all the equipment from our 24/7 data center, and we bundle all that into the price of the equipment. So they don't need to hire staff for that anymore, and they don't need to hire expensive third parties. So that will actually reduce the annual maintenance by 100%. You'll notice we have some quotes here from other customers. Again, that provides value. It shows that we have customers who've experienced these benefits, so we're not just making this up. And they're able to see sometimes if you can put direct quotes there and name the customer, that's even better. Even if it's anonymous, they see that other people are seeing these benefits. They still need to understand your logic and your thinking, but seeing that other folks have experienced it is an important point as well. So here we talk about energy consumption and the cost reduction, and we're claiming a 35% cost reduction. You know, maybe they think that's too aggressive, and so we can reduce that to 30%. And then finally, downtime. This gets into that revenue impact. And what we're saying is, if their average 20 hours per year today, we think we can reduce that by 20%. So we're going to cut off 4 hours of unplanned downtime, which, if we do the math, will be $180,000 in revenue to them for the year. So finally, we start to get into price. And here we have a way that we can talk about price in several different ways. I like using this chart the best. I think it's the clearest, which really compares us directly to the competition and what they're offering. So on an annual basis, our price for our equipment over a 10-year span would be about $561,000. Competition is cheaper. They're coming in at $500,000, and we're aware of that. But we've also done the math for Intel, and we've totaled up the other three areas of value that the competition can't offer. And when we look at the total, even though we're more expensive, we're providing over $500,000 in value back to Intel. So going with the cheaper competitor, they can very easily see that wouldn't be the financially best decision. So again, we've done some math. We can also change some of these numbers down here if we choose to. But hopefully Intel now is seeing things in a different light. We still really haven't talked about product yet, and we'll need to back up our claims even more. But we've now gotten our foot in the door by having a different type of conversation and not coming in and being like everyone else and talking product. So maybe we agree on some next steps with Intel, and we have ways to edit these slides. You can make changes and then you can save. We can save this as an Intel presentation. So now it's saved back into the cloud. And then we could download this into a PDF or a PowerPoint. I'll do a PDF. So now we've come to an agreement with Intel about the potential value that we can provide. And now we're giving them a copy of that conversation, which, hopefully one of those next steps, if we get into that conversation, is a next meeting with their CFO. And they can hand this to the CFO prior to the next meeting and say, here's the impact that this new company we're talking to, or Aventus, can have versus if we go with with the incumbent NTG. So that is it, and I will hand this back to Nick. I think is.
Yep. Thank you,
Okay.
Brian. All right, everyone should be able to see my screen. So thanks to Mike and Brian for both sharing your insights and also showing us, how they can be applied using Leverage Point. So now it's time for the Q&A. We've already seen a couple great questions come in. Just as a reminder, we'll be raffling off one copy of Mike's book to someone that fills out the survey, so don't forget to take it at the end of the webinar. The common question we always get, yes, the webinar is being recorded. We'll send it out in a day or two once that recording is ready. So I think we have time for a couple questions. This first one looks pretty good. So Mike, when do you introduce price into the discussion?
Well, that's an interesting one. Well, I don't really think we want to be talking too much about price until we've really understood the needs and the issues and the challenges, and we've gained a commitment from the customer to do something. And more importantly, perhaps had the opportunity to build our value. Now, I have to agree, that is the perfect scenario. But the real world is often quite different to that. And very often they are just flying kites so that they can get some sort of steer on what the prices are. So, I mean, you could ask them what they budgeted, if they have a budget for it. If they have got a budget, what's in the budget, how much is it? Or if you're really pushed, you might have to give them a very broad price range in terms, just to give them some sort of steer as to what they may be in for. But as much as possible, until you've built your value and they can understand the value of what you do, I would be cautious about introducing price too early, particularly if you think this is going to be a very price sensitive sort of a customer.
That makes sense. Great. So the next one I'm seeing here, I think you're referring to the 3 components of a weak value proposition. So that was an earlier slide.
Yeah.
How do you get a team to improve on each?
Undertake value discovery better is a simple answer to the first bit. As I said, when we talked about resonating is about demonstrating to the customer that you can address the issues and the challenges that the customer has shared with you. And if you've not asked great questions, if you've not done great value discovery, that you're not going to have the depth of understanding that you need. So certainly from resonation point of view, you need to understand the customer better. I think, again, as I mentioned during the presentation, when it comes to differentiation, you really do need to think outside of just the product. I talk to loads of clients who obsess about the product and obsess about the fact that it's not different enough. Customers aren't just buying the product. Customers are buying the entire experience of doing business with you. So do look outside of the product. And as we said, if one buyer said 12% of his meetings have got any value, that's an instant way of adding some serious differentiation to what you do. If you make sure that the meetings that you have with your customers are absolutely jam-packed full of value for the customer, then that's a great way of differentiating. And then finally, when it comes to substantiation, I think if ever there was a great argument for making sure that you have good case studies, then this is it. And as Brian said on his presentation, those little quotes at the bottom of the slides that he was going through when we were looking at maintenance costs and the like, they're part of it. They are part of substantiating the fact that you can do the things that you say that you can do.
I think that makes sense. All right, great, thanks. This one's about some questions. So what are some questions you would ask to help identify whether or not you want to win the business or not? And what are some ones you might ask to understand whether you can win it at all?
Well, I think in the conversation that you're having with the customer, I think you'll start to get a view, I guess. As I said, we need to understand whether it's going to be profitable for us or not. I mean, again, is this a sort of customer that is known for working well with its suppliers, or is it known for just trying to screw everybody into the ground on price? And they will have a reputation in the marketplace for that. But also, if you look at what they sell to their customers, is what they sell to their customers value added, or is it cheap? Are they actually going for the lower end of the market? Because if they are, there is a real risk that they'll want to screw you down on price as part of that initiative. Is it on your target list? I mean, again, I'm hoping that, when you start the year and you know what business you're trying to look for and what you need to win, you will have a target list of the kind of customers that you want to deal with. So is this one of them? And if it isn't, how are you going to justify investing your time, money, and effort into it? Is there a conflict of interest? Are you conflicted out because that you're working with a competitor? I think there are lots of things, and you will get a feel for whether this is the kind of customer that you want. Can you win it? I think actually there's an interesting thing. If you can't get access to key people, if they won't share with you the kind of information that you need to be able to demonstrate your value to them. Obviously the classics, if you see the footprint of your competitor all over any tender document and things like that, those are pretty good clues that winning it is going to be a struggle. And as I said, you need to, I think, constantly review this as you go through the sales process to make sure that if you need to drop an opportunity, even though it's in the pipeline, you should drop it and invest your time, money, and effort in more profitable alternatives.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I had a couple of really good ones just come across the line, but I'm afraid we only have time for one more. So if we don't get to your question, we'll try to reach out to you in person and answer it for you. I think this last one that just crossed, I think is pretty good. What parts of the value sales process that you talked about earlier do you see organizations struggle with the most?
Well, I think, to be honest, value discovery, because value discovery for an awful lot of the people that I'm working with, introducing that value discovery component is transformational. Because going back to one of those 3 challenges I outlined right at the beginning is that salespeople feel comfortable talking about their products. They feel less comfortable talking customer. So that's probably it more than anything else. So putting value discovery at the heart of the conversation. But I think also the bottom line, Nick, is actually having a sales process at all and getting the sales team to use it. and for me, that means, is it well trained? Does everybody know how it works? Is it coached properly? Are they practicing it? And are we practicing in role plays and things the way that it works? Because ultimately, it needs to be made absolutely second nature. So if we're talking about this being transformational, moving from product first to customer first, just telling people to do it differently is not going to be enough. The training, the coaching, the role playing, the practicing is absolutely critical.
And that makes a lot of sense, and we talk about that a lot, so thank you for that. And before everyone goes, we have an upcoming webinar next month. So you can pre-register for it in the exit survey. We're going to be joined by Stefan Liozu. He'll be sharing secrets and best practices on the art of value quantification. So we're really excited about this one. We're always excited to have him back. So make sure you pre-register in the exit survey. And that's it from us today. We'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us, and a special thank you for Mike for his insights. And from all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.